All right, and we are live. Sorry everyone for being a few minutes late. Totally my fault. I messed up on some technical stuff. But we're here now, as usual. If you guys are joining us live, please hop on, say hi, hello, share what the weather is like where you are, because everyone knows I like to hear everyone else's weather situations. Here in New Jersey, it's like 90 something and really hot. And so I'm, sheltered in the air conditioning. But if you guys are having some fun weather, let us know. I'm going to take 1 second to share our link in our event so that everybody who RSVP'd can find us. While I do that, I would like to introduce our guest for today. Today we're talking to Linda Brown from Tabitha Thomas Studios. We're going to be talking about tech editing, and I'm really excited about this topic, and I know a lot of you are too because we've had so many pre-submitted questions. So Linda, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in this business, maybe how you got started knitting, and kind of how you found yourself here?
Okay, well, hello everybody. I started knitting when I was about 5 or 6 years old. My mum was a tremendous knitter, and I just remember this so vividly. She was knitting a Fair Isle top, and I was just watching all these 3 or 4 different strands of yarn all coming together to make this pattern. And it absolutely fascinated me, and I just nagged her until she taught me how to knit. And I just never looked back. I was knitting stuff for my toys, knitting scarves for teddy bears and all this kind of stuff. I then wanted to learn how to crochet, but she couldn't crochet to save her life, but her friend could. So she showed me how to crochet, and then I just took off with that as well. So by the time I was about 7 or 8, I could do both. And I would flip between the two depending on the mood I was in. I've never had a problem reading patterns. Even from that age, it just all made sense to me. So I feel like I was born knitting. I just have been knitting for so long. It's more years than I care to admit. And then when I was in my teens, and it wasn't cool to knit, it was the 70s, and it just was not the cool thing to do. So I didn't knit for quite a few years. And then when I left home and I didn't have any money, in those days, it was before beautiful designer yarns that you can get now. Yarn was pretty cheap and cheerful. I started knitting again because it was a good way to expand my wardrobe. And I really haven't stopped knitting since then. I've always had an office job, a 9 to 5 paper shuffling, pen pushing job, and always hated it all my life. And a couple of years ago, I was just browsing on the internet looking for something. I can't even remember what I was looking for now. And I came across Jolie Kelly's tech editor course, and I started reading all the stuff about it. And I thought, wow, this is me. I've got to do this. There's just no two ways about it. I've got to do this. So I just signed up there and then. And I thought, well, I didn't even think it would be a career. I just thought it was something to do, sort of like the next step. Because I just found it really, quite geeky, and really found it fascinating. So I did the course and just loved it. And then I sort of put a few shouts out on Instagram and Ravelry and what have you. And then I started getting clients. And then I thought, wow, what's going on here? I'm actually getting work out of this. And then it increased and increased. And I didn't work Fridays anyway. I only worked Monday to Thursday, and I found that my Fridays were getting full. So I then took another day off, a half day. And then found that 1.5 days wasn't enough. And in April of this year, the beginning of this year, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to leave my job. And April, I actually left. End of April, I left my day job and started doing this full time.
Congrats.
And I just remember sitting here the first morning and thinking, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
I'm sure we've all been there. But honestly, it's taken off in such a phenomenal way. I would never have dreamt it would have taken off like this. And I'm just chuffed to bits. I keep saying to people, if I'm sleeping, don't wake me. If this is a dream, then I just don't want it to end, because it's just, amazing what's happened in, the last 2 years, just purely by stumbling across a website on the internet. It's just crazy.
That's fantastic.
I've also now got into designing, which is tremendous fun. I recently did Frenchie's Initiate Lip Design Challenge. And then I joined her Swatch Studio circle thingy, and I've been working through the program on that, and I'm just loving it. It just, again, it seemed like the natural progression.
Yeah.
I also do some yarn dyeing. Well, a couple of years ago I started yarn dyeing, and then
anything else?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I hate being bored. So a couple of years ago I started doing that, but that had to take a back seat while I was building up the tech editing. But now, I'm going to get back in. Now that I'm doing this full time, I have got time to get back into the yarn dyeing as well. So I feel like I'm a fully rounded knitting, crocheting person.
That's awesome.
Doing the whole thing. Got lots of plans and ideas of things I want to do in the future. And it's just a case of sort of galvanizing it all together. So it's been a really exciting journey these past couple of years.
Well, I have to say, I'm jealous whenever anyone says that they started learning at like 5, 6, 7, because I feel like the last few experts I've talked to, because everyone starts with, how they learn. They all started that young, and I was like, I was 16. I feel like I was a little late to the party. But I
know people that are older than that, when they've started knitting, so don't.
Yeah, it's true.
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Everyone comes in their own time, but I think it's funny, how you wanted to learn to crochet too, and, started dyeing yarn. And it's funny how, the yarn just kind of like sucks us in. I don't know if I know anyone who does one thing. Like, I have friends who don't crochet, but they spin.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't they're always doing, like, there's always more than one facet to the craft. And I think that's one of the things that I love about it, is there's so many different ways you can interact with it.
Absolutely.
Even something like tech editing, that's a whole nother ballgame.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And if you've got even just the slightest bit of curiosity about things, or just the slightest bit of interest in maybe going off a tangent, you just don't know where it's going to lead, and you just don't know where you're going to end up. It's so exciting.
And I think as creatives, we're good at going off on those tangents.
Absolutely.
We're good at following that train of thought, just wherever it goes. Well, awesome. I love to hear everyone's stories. That's like one of my favorite parts of doing these. And I'm just going to take a break for real quick to say hi to everyone who is joining us live. We have Amanda Pippin, Dana Gervais, a good friend of mine, Amanda W., Chris, Karen, Sarah. Amanda said she started crocheting 5 years ago. So look at that. Wow. There we go. That's someone who started relatively recently. And that's awesome. Well, I'm so excited that you guys are joining us today. If you have any questions while we're chatting, please send them through, but I'm going to hold most of the questions until the end, just so that we can focus on our train of thought, and then we'll go back to the questions. I have everyone's questions that were submitted earlier, so we'll get to all of those. All right, so the first thing we kind of discussed that we wanted to talk about is, what exactly is it that a tech editor does? I think a lot of us confuse tech editing with testing. And I also think a lot of us are muddy on exactly the scope of what a tech editor, the stuff that a tech editor performs. What do they do and what do they not do? So can you give us a better picture of exactly a tech editor's purpose and what they do with your pattern?
Okay. Yeah. Well, basically what we do is we make sure that the pattern works, but we don't knit it. We don't knit anything. We knit it in our heads.
Okay.
I mean, if there's a stitch that you just can't get your head around, and you sort of think, well, how the hell does that work? Then you get the needles out and you do a little bit and you think, oh yeah, right, okay, I get it now. But generally speaking, you just do it all in your head. So, the first thing I do when I get a pattern is I give it a read through, just as if I'm picking up a pattern to knit or to crochet. So I just give it a read through, make sure it makes sense, see the flow of it, see what the construction is and where it's going, essentially. I then check it for spelling, for grammar, for punctuation, all that kind of thing, because it's really weird. I mean, I go through and I'll put in the colon, or suggest that the colons put in if they're missed out, or the full stops and things like that. And they're not earth-shatteringly important. They're not, the world isn't going to stop turning if that full stop's not put there, but it's the fact that it's not there. It speaks volumes. You will notice if it's not there.
Yeah.
It's the little things like that. So it's all that kind of stuff you have to go through and check. And then things like make sure the abbreviations are there, the ones that are there have been used, and the ones that are used are in the list, and all that kind of thing. Then of course you've got the big things like make sure that the sizes are correct. I mean, if it's a garment and it's graded, you've got to make sure that the sizes are realistic and they're not super silly. You know, sort of you're suggesting a 20-inch chest for an adult woman or something. You know, something really, really bizarre like that. And of course the other thing is if there's metric and imperial measurements, make sure they all tally.
Right.
You've then got to get the spreadsheet out and do some mathematics and go through and make sure that the stitch count does equal the inches, does equal, you know, if it says cast on 100 stitches, that those 100 stitches do actually come to the number of inches that it says they will.
Right.
Another biggie is patterns. It's so, I mean, I did a tech edit for the little wrist warmers, you know, fingerless gloves. And they came in 3 sizes. And they had a pattern, a sort of a cable pattern. I can't remember how, 4-6 stitch pattern. I can't remember now. But the first size and the third size were perfect. But the middle size, the pattern repeat didn't fit in the number of stitches. Although the number of stitches graded correctly from the small, medium to the large, the actual stitch count didn't fit into the middle.
Wow.
Yeah. So it seems like that you've got to watch, because if you're knitting and you get to the end of the row and you think, hang on a minute, I'm 5 stitches short. So you unpick it and then you do it again and you think, no, I'm going mad. So you unpick it and you do it again. And then you realise that the pattern's wrong. That is something that a tech editor should, or even a tech editor should pick up on. That is, you know, that's quite a basic thing.
I think that's a fantastic way, and I'm totally sorry for interrupting, but I think that's just a great visual for people to understand the purpose of a tech editor. Like when you as the user of the pattern, when you encounter those patterns where you're doing it and then you're undoing it and you literally think you're crazy, like that's the purpose of a tech editor, is to eliminate that feeling.
Absolutely. You are supposed to pick up a pattern and just work it, knit it, crochet it, whatever, from beginning to end, and think, wow, that was a good pattern. Or not even think that, because if the pattern is that good, you don't even think about it.
Right.
You just have this wonderful thing at the end of it.
Yeah.
You shouldn't even think about anything in the pattern. You should just do it, because the pattern should be 100%. And the other thing, the other big hot thing is to make sure that the chart, if there's charts and written instructions, to make sure that they tally, because quite often they don't. If you use a program like Stitch Mastery, you're fine, because that produces the written with the chart.
Right.
But I do have one client who she refuses to use Stitch Mastery. She can't get her head around it. So she sits and types out I've told her that I'll do the charts, but she says, oh, no, that's okay, I'll do it. So she does the chart, and then she'll sit and type all the written instructions out. And they go on for pages and pages, like War and Peace. It just goes on forever. And I have to check everything. I have to check all of the charts to the written instructions, word by word, line by line.
Wow.
And I will quite often find that she's left out yarn overs or knit two togethers, or, you know, she forgets, she misses, she doesn't forget things, she misses things.
Yeah.
Because she's typing it all out. So that is a really, really crucial thing that has to be checked.
Wow.
And also, you know, little things like making sure that it flows properly, and to make sure that if stitch markers are used, how many are used. Because if it just says stitch markers, you might only have 4, but you might need, I mean, I've listed things, so I've needed about 20.
Wow.
There's been a lot of pattern repeats and stuff like that. So you need to know, little things like that. You need to know how many stitch markers you need, whether you're going to need buttons and how many, or if you're going to need zip, or just to remind you to make sure you've got your darning needle for weaving in the ends at the end of the project, whether it needs to be blocked or not. All these little things all need to be in a pattern, and that's what a tech editor has to check to make sure that they're all there, and to also, with the tension, to make sure that is, or gauge, to make sure that is sensible, whether it's blocked or unblocked.
Right. All
There's
those
a
little
hundred markings.
details.
Yeah, all those details have to be looked at and checked and to make sure that they're there or not there, as the case may be. There is a lot to go through, definitely.
It
And
sounds like
sometimes,
it. I think, and I have, we were talking about this before we went live. I have a very minimal idea of what a tech editor does until you just, kind of listed everything. And I think I had an idea, I could sit down and say, yeah, like they check the math and they make sure that like things are consistent and whatever. But I don't think I quite grasped the amount of things that you look at and check over and make sure are correct. And, I can't imagine ever publishing a pattern without a tech editor after hearing all of that. Especially not, anything that should fit someone.
yes, definitely.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you going through all of those things because I do think that a lot of us are kind of, especially if we haven't tech edited in the past, or even if we worked with a tech editor, but we haven't been close with them or we didn't really kind of understand, we just kind of handed it off and like walked away. I do think you can kind of miss out on all of the things that they go over. So I think that's fantastic. Now I have a thing, because as you were talking about the woman who likes to make her write out her own charts, I'm just curious, and this is probably only me that's curious, but how do you keep track of what you've checked over and what you haven't? Because I find that when I'm reading like longer patterns or things like that, I tend to lose my place a lot. So do you have a system for that?
I have a checklist.
Okay.
And I literally go through the checklist and I literally tick off as I do it.
Nice.
That is the only way I'm ever going to remember to do everything.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you are going to forget.
Right.
Especially if it's a big pattern, especially going back to that particular designer.
Yeah.
Her patterns just go on forever. So you do need to have a checklist to make sure that you have covered everything
Nice.
that needs to be covered.
I love me some checklists.
Oh, definitely.
I'm a big fan. So, how important is consistency in a pattern? Like you talked about, making sure that the colons are where they should be and like everything's kind of formatted properly. But once you've seen a pattern that was maybe inconsistent in the way it labeled its rows or, the way it ordered the things that it said, how important do you consider consistency in, that formatting of a pattern?
I think it is incredibly important because, again, you know what it's like. You get your pattern, you get your yarn, you just want to cast on, you just want to do it.
Yeah.
You don't want to sort of think, well, which bit do I start? Do I start with the back? Do I start with the sleeves? Or is it toe up? Or if it's socks, or cuff down? You don't want it jumping around all over the place. You want it to be in a logical order and you do want it to flow. Not all patterns start with the back and then the front and then the sleeves, and then designers start with different things depending on what you're making, and what the end result is going to be. But you still need to have that consistency. You don't want it jumping around. That is a slight exaggeration. Nobody actually presents a pattern that's that disjointed.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure that it does make sense and that it starts at the beginning and that it ends at the end and not sort of leaves you midway or, sort of you get to the end of an instruction and it doesn't actually tell you how to finish off what you're doing or how to go on to the next bit.
Yeah.
That's another thing. How to how to go from one get my words out. The transition from one piece to the next piece.
Yeah.
That is vital. And I have actually seen patterns that don't have that sort of consistency.
I was going to say, I have seen patterns where, and I've worked with patterns especially because I started crocheting first and I started knitting like 5 or 6 years later. Mm-hmm. So I consider myself still very much a beginner knitter. Like I haven't knit a sweater, like I've done very minimal lace, like, very simple stuff. And there are a lot of times when I'm reading knitting patterns that are fairly simple themselves. I would consider them like at my level. I feel like there are steps missing. Those transitions that you're talking about, the little pieces that maybe the designer does unthinkingly, they know how to do X, Y, Z, but the person reading the pattern does not. And that's something that I find frustrating sometimes when I'm reading patterns.
Absolutely. I always think that, I mean, a design, ultimately it's up to the designer what they do. It's their pattern, it's their voice.
Right.
But I always think, and I always try and suggest that you might think it's an intermediate pattern, you might think it's an advanced pattern, but you are going to get a newbie that's going to pick that pattern up and think, oh, I'll have a go at that.
Yeah.
So you've got to always think of the newbie. You've always got to think of the person that might not really understand what that cast on is, or what that cast off is, or what that particular stitch is, or how to get from A to B to C. You've got to think as a new knitter or new crocheter all the time, and have that mindset, because then that way you'll always remember to include everything that has to be included in that pattern. If you start thinking, well, this is an experienced pattern or an intermediate pattern, you're going to leave crucial things out.
Yeah.
So that I always think is a really, really crucial thing, to always think in terms of a new knitter or a new crocheter who hasn't done much and still needs their hand holding. And I think if you think along those lines, then you're not going to go wrong.
I love that. I think it's really important for our designers to think that way, because it can leave, even if you don't intend it to, it can leave a bad taste in the mouth of the person actually using the pattern. You know, just the feeling of confusion, or even sometimes we turn it on ourselves and be like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not ready for that. Maybe I can't do that. And I think, you know, doing all we can to kind of make sure that the person on the receiving end has an amazing experience. And part of that is making sure we present it in a way that is accessible to everyone.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think
especially
that's fantastic.
These days, because I mean, yarn isn't cheap. And if you go for a really good indie dyed yarn and it's cost you an arm and a leg, and you're going to knit this jumper or shawl or whatever, you want to be able to be confident that that pattern is going to produce the garment or the thing that you want to make, having invested all that time and all that money into the yarn and actually sitting and doing the knitting it or whatever. You want to know that the instructions that you've got in front of you work. I mean, it's like baking a cake.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't look at a recipe and it doesn't tell you what temperature to put the oven on at, or, you know, how to beat the eggs, or, I don't know, a very basic instruction in a recipe. You wouldn't do it.
Right.
You know, it just wouldn't make sense. Well, it would be the same for a knitting pattern. It has to make sense.
I think I think that's important. So in that vein, what are some mistakes that you see designers making when you first get their patterns, or maybe some things that you wish designers knew to kind of do before they hand it off to their tech editor?
Well, one of the big things that a designer should do is read it through. I mean, I know that, you know, they've looked over this pattern about a gajillion times, and in the end you can't see the wood for the trees, but put it to one side, forget about it for a day or two, come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes, read it through, make sure it makes sense. Make sure, I mean, I recently had a couple of patterns and it drove me insane, where two different designers, but they had copied and pasted. And I mean, I copy and paste all the time, but make sure that the original thing that you copied was right.
Yeah.
But it ends up being like a virus, and it goes through all the pattern, because they keep copying and pasting the same thing. So you get the same mistake throughout the pattern, and that is just so frustrating. And if your tech editor is charging you by the hour, they're going to charge you for that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a really good point to remember. If you're being charged by the hour, the longer it takes your tech editor to edit your pattern, the more you're going to pay. And if you're on a tight budget, which let's face it, we all are, you're not going to go back. You're either not going to go back to that tech editor or not have your pattern edited at all. I mean, a lot of people just rely on having their patterns test knitted, and I actually think the two should go together. I mean, yeah, you can have your pattern test knitted, or crocheted, but a lot of knitters and crocheters will read the pattern but do it their way, and they might not necessarily pick up a mistake, or they might not read it properly or thoroughly. I mean, I'm not knocking test knitters. You know, they do a very valuable job, but to have just test knitters on their own would be like having a tech editor on their own. You need them both. You can't have one without the other. Realistically, you do really need to have both. But other things I think that designers should look out for is to make sure, again, coming back to the charts, to make sure that they actually do agree with the written instructions. I mean, as I said, if you've got Stitch Mastery, you can get away with it because it does. But then having said that, you still need to check it because some of the terminology, depending on which style sheet you're using within Stitch Mastery,
Right.
some of the terminology can be a bit quirky, shall we say. So some of it does need tweaking. And actually talking about style sheets, it's always worth having a style sheet so you do always have a consistent pattern.
Yeah.
And it's just, just jot it down, just jot it in Word, on your laptop or whatever, or just make notes in a notebook of how you would like your pattern to come out, how you want the layout, the wording, keep a list of all the abbreviations that you use, and how you like to start your rows, whether you have it emboldened or not emboldened, and all this kind of stuff. Keep a note of all those things so that all your patterns will always be the same, will always be consistent, and that becomes your brand.
Yes.
And that again is really important. I did a pattern a couple of years ago, really nice Shetland cardi, but the pattern was like a booklet. And it was, the girl that wrote it, I believe, in a past life had been a researcher. And you could tell because she used 58 million words when she could have just got away with half a dozen. And the pattern just went on and on and on, page after page after page. And I was losing the will to live because it was just too big. And the other problem was it went from a tiny little girl up to a fairly big sized woman. Yeah. So there were lots of sizes. I mean, it was split. But it's still, it was a huge pattern and it was crazy. And I always think of that pattern when I'm working because I always sort of think what a nightmare that pattern was. And trying to keep a pattern as concise as possible, but still have all the information in it, I think is key. Definitely.
It's a little balancing act, right? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that seems like a lot of really fantastic advice. I have one more kind of point that I want to touch on. Oh, my mouse stopped working. That would help. And I lost my train of thought.
Because it's getting dark and it's a bit off-putting. I'm sitting by a window.
What time is it there for you? Just out of curiosity.
It's just on 8 o'clock in the evening.
Oh. Okay.
And the nights are drawing in now and it's almost dark out now.
When I was talking to Babs last time because she did an expert Q&A with us.
Oh, yes, I watched that, yeah.
I think I embarrassed her by saying that I loved her accent as much as I did. Sorry,
you said that about mine as well.
I was going to, and then I thought that maybe I just shouldn't because then I'd seem like a real weirdo.
I like your accent, so we'll quit.
Oh, thanks, cool. So one of the questions we had ahead of time, I want to bring up now because you were talking about tech editors and testers. And in my mind, I feel like they go hand in hand in that they're two different ways to proofread the same thing. Now, I know tech editors obviously go into a lot more detail and they check all the math and all that stuff. But Katrina had a question, which I think is interesting. She said, which do you think is more important, tech editor or testers? My first experience with a tech editor was very, very bad. Can a very detailed designer do without one? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I would say no. The more detailed the pattern, definitely the more you need a tech editor, without a doubt, and especially if it's lots of sizes. I mean, if it's just a simple beanie hat, one size, maybe not.
Yeah.
Or even just a simple pair of socks. But if you've got a jumper or a sweater or a cardigan or something that goes across maybe 6, 7, 8 sizes with an intricate ferrule design or an intricate cable or lace, or it's starts top down, or I don't know, any of these things, then I do think you need to have somebody with a technical eye looking over it just to check it through before it is knitted, because it can save an awful lot of heartache for sure.
Okay, awesome. So Courtney asked a question in the same vein, and then I'm going to take a break and look at our, we have so many questions about testers and tech editors together.
Oh gosh.
So Courtney asked, if I have a design tech edited, should I also have it tested? I'm afraid that it will take forever to get this design tested, and I'm so excited to share it.
Oh, bless. I would say yes.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is, again, if it's garment and it's in several sizes, you really should have it knitted in all the sizes or crocheted in all the worked. I'm going to say worked instead of knitted. You should have it worked, made in all the sizes to make sure that the pattern does work. I know, coming back to the designer that types out her patterns, she has recently designed this amazing wrap, and it is huge. It took her forever to knit the sample. Yeah. So what she's just going to do, she's got 2 or 3 test knitters, and she's asked them just to knit a sample of the stitch pattern. So that person's got rows 1 to 50, that person's got rows 51 to 100, and so on. Okay. Just so they can just do a little section each, just to make sure that it works. That's one way of getting around it, especially if it is just I won't say just, but if it is a wrap or a shawl or something like that. But otherwise, I do think the two should be done together, definitely. And really, ultimately, I think it should be tech edited first, then test knitted.
Okay.
I think it should be done in that order. Definitely.
That's perfect, because Amanda asked what comes first, pattern testers or tech editors. Yeah, so I think that's an awesome look at testing and tech editing and how they go hand in hand and where they overlap and where they don't and all of that stuff, because I think obviously a lot of people had a lot of questions about kind of what that even looks like.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Let's see. I'm going to take a quick peek at our comments. Let's see. Karen said she learned to crochet when she was fairly young, but didn't learn knitting until she was nearly 40, and spinning just a couple of years ago. Awesome.
Wow.
I've been deciding if I want to dabble in spinning.
I tried it once, and it was just one of those things that's too fiddly for me.
Yeah.
And I just thought, no, life's too short.
Yeah. I like that view.
I'm in absolute awe of people that do it, but it's not something that I could do.
I have friends that spin, and it's actually mesmerizing to watch.
Yes,
and
it is.
They'll like spin, and I'm just like watching them, and I don't know why. It's like so interesting.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
But it's really cool. Sarah said she learned knitting at 5 years old as a form of physical therapy. That's really awesome.
Oh. Yeah.
Selena said hi. Hi, Selena. Babs said hi.
Oh, hi, Babs.
Technically, she said howdy, but she said hi.
How are you doing?
Babs said, I always have a beginner test all of my designs along with more experienced knitters or crocheters. That's a good idea to kind of have also a range of, because again, everyone is going to come back with a different experience.
Absolutely.
And if you can get a beginner in front of your pattern to test it and be like, hey, I don't really know what you meant by this. Maybe you need to elaborate more.
Which comes back to what I was saying earlier about how designers should think for beginners. Definitely. It doesn't matter what level the pattern is. If you think for a beginner, then your pattern's going to be easy to follow, or it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Karen said it's very important not to assume that the knitter knows those things, which, yes, it's very, and Babs said it was so embarrassing. I think she was talking about the accent comment, yes. Sorry. Love you. Okay. So Babs had we have a few other questions, so we're gonna get through those real quick, and then I think we did an awesome job. We did an awesome job. You did an awesome job. I didn't do anything. Babs asked, what are your top tips on finding the right tech editor? And she has 2 other questions, but I'm gonna separate them because they're all different. So I'll let you do one at a time. So what are your top tips for finding the right tech editor?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's got to be somebody that you're going to get along with. So, you need a little bit of rapport in your emails. You can tell from somebody's emails sort of how you're going to get on with them. It's got to be somebody that you've got to be on the same wavelength, for sure. It's also got to be, like, for instance, I don't like, I don't knit three-dimensional little toys and things. I know you crochet them, don't you?
Yes.
I can't get my head around them. I've tried knitting them and I just can't and crocheting them, and I can't get my head around them. I made a Dalek once and it just kept collapsing. So I just put stuffing in it, and it was all little bits were just too fiddly to knit. And then I did a Pokemon, the yellow Pokemon.
Oh, Pikachu.
That's the fella. I crocheted a little Pikachu and he just drove me absolutely insane. So I know that I can't, that sort of, I just don't make those sort of things. So if somebody comes to me and they want me to edit toys, and I have had people do that, I won't do it.
Yeah.
Because I can't get my head around the 3D thing, it wouldn't be fair on them. For me to say, oh yes, I'll do that, and I think, I don't understand this pattern, and I'll sit there and start knitting it because I don't know what I'm doing. That is not a good move.
Yeah.
So it's got to be somebody that fits in with your pattern. Again, I know some people who will edit the most intricate sweaters and shawls and this, that, and the other, but they won't touch socks.
Yeah.
So things like that. So you've got to make sure that the tech editor that you want to use, A, that you're going to get on with them, and B, that they are going to actually edit the item that you want them to edit, that it is something within their perimeters, if you like, within their remit, of something that they would be prepared to do. Don't be afraid to ask that, because within the tech editing community, on Facebook, we've got some closed groups that we go to. Like with the stuffed toy thing, I went to the groups and I said, look, I've been asked to do this. Not my game. Anybody interested? And then you'd get half a dozen or so email addresses or websites of people who would be interested. And you just go back to the designer and say, terribly sorry, this isn't the kind of thing that I do, but here's a bunch of people who do that thing.
Yeah.
Go for it. So it's not a case of, oh no, I don't want to work with you and go away, don't darken my doorstep again, sort of thing. We will always try and find somebody to help you if it's not something that we as tech editors would do.
Right.
So.
Awesome. Well, I think that's some really helpful advice. So her next question was, if something has gone wrong, how do you suggest a designer broach that discussion with their tech editor?
Oh, you mean after the pattern's edited and it's been released?
I would assume either like in the interim, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, I would assume that was what she meant by her question.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's not going to be anything too dramatic. Hopefully it's just maybe you missed I don't know, maybe the chart is out by the written instructions, just a fraction or something like that. If it's something small that can be easily remedied, anything, whatever it might be, but first thing, talk to your tech editor, send the pattern back to them, tell them what was wrong, and ask them to help you resolve whatever it was. And then I think it's up to the designer and the tech editor how you want to take it from there, whether you would want to say, as a tech editor, whether you'd sort of say, well, I'll give you a discount on your next pattern because I made that mistake, or I'll do your next pattern for free, or something like that. It could be, it wouldn't be. It would actually be something that tech editors miss. Really, you've just got to own up to it and say, I'm really sorry, I should have spotted that and I didn't.
Yeah.
Have a discount on your next pattern or have a freebie on your next pattern, do something like that. Always be willing to help. We're all human.
This is true, yeah.
You can look at something, as I was saying before, in the end you can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
You do check and you double check and you hope and you make sure that everything is okay. But sometimes something might slip through the net, could be anything that you have just missed and you just keep missing over and over again. In that sort of situation, you just put your hands up and say, I'm really, really sorry. I'll correct it for you and, sort of take it from there.
Awesome. So her last question was, what time frames are reasonable to expect a new tech editor to work to? So I think she's kind of trying to figure out how long it would take a tech editor to actually edit a pattern.
Right. Well, a newbie is going to take longer, obviously, than a more experienced. I mean, I remember the first time I got my first paid pattern, and I sat there and I thought, oh, I don't know what to do. Like it was a foreign language.
Yeah.
And I thought, ooh. Now what do I do? Go and put the kettle on. You've got to expect them to take longer than a more experienced tech editor. I mean, an experienced tech editor might take an hour to do a hat or something, or maybe an hour and a half to do a pair of socks. You can expect a new tech editor to take twice as long as that.
Okay.
Easily. So if you are working with a new tech editor, just be patient.
Awesome. So I just want to make sure we didn't miss any. We have one more from Wendelika, and please tell me if I'm saying her name wrong. But she asked, what is the best thing that you can do to help save your tech editor time with your pattern? And I know we talked about a few things, but are there any, like, what is your top tip to do as a designer to help save the tech editor time when they first get to work?
My top tip would be read it through.
I knew you were going to say that. See, I learned something.
Yay! Really, honestly, that is the best thing to do. Read it through. Make sure that it does make sense. Also, when you send your stuff through to your tech editor, make sure that you send all the photos. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be the stylized shots that are going to go on the end pattern.
Right.
But just as long as your tech editor can see what it is they're editing. I mean, I have had patterns come through to me. I've had the pattern, I've had the chart, and no photo. Okay, it might be a pair of socks, it might be a shawl, but it would be nice to see exactly what it looks like.
Yeah.
Just give me a hint, just give me a little bit of an idea of what I'm supposed to be doing. Especially if there's a stitch pattern involved, it's vital that you let your tech editor see what the stitch pattern looks like, because the tech editor isn't, I mean, yes, as I said before, you might have to knit up a bit or crochet up a bit if you can't work out what the pattern is.
Yeah.
You're looking at it and think, well, this doesn't make sense, so you have to work a bit. But you shouldn't have to do that all the time. So if you've got a photo, then you can think, oh, right, okay, yes, so that's what the pattern looks like. Right, yep, okay, read it through. Yeah, I get that. It makes sense. So I would say read it through and make sure that you send all the things that have to be sent, all the correct attachments, and vitally a photo.
I love that. Awesome. Well, let's see. I don't see any more questions coming through from the live stream, and we've got all our pre-submitted questions. So I think I learned so much, and I'm sure everyone else did. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. It was brilliant fun. Really enjoyed it in the
Yay!
end.
Yay! So where can our audience learn more about you and your business?
Okay, well, I'm on Instagram and I've also got a website. I'll put the links in below after the
Amanda, I think Amanda has them too. She's our community leader. She usually throws them in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Tabitha Thomas Studio on Instagram.
Awesome.
And my website is tabithathomas.co.uk. Awesome. And you'll find all the information you need about me on both of those. On my website, because I don't just do tech editing, I also do grading, I do chart creation, schematic creation. So you can have any or all of those. You can mix and match to suit your needs. But on my website, on each page, there is a form that you can fill out to submit to me if you want me to do a pattern. So it's easy peasy. Once you get on my website, it's all really easy to see what I do and how to get in touch with me.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Audience, thank you guys for being here. If you're watching on the replay, hello from the past. Make sure you guys stay tuned in the group for more expert Q&As coming up. We always post an event. If you RSVP to the events, if you can make it, you'll get the notification about the live stream. Coming up soon, we have Sarah Devantier from Knit a Bit of Whimsy, and we have Selena Baca, who's going to talk to us about using crochet alongs or knit alongs to sell patterns. I'm super excited about this. Selena is my work wife. I talk to her all the time, and she was telling me about this whole thing, and I was like, we have to talk to my group about this because I know everyone's going to enjoy that. So make sure you guys stay up to date, follow those events and RSVP, and until then, we'll see you all next time.
Bye. Thank you.